Hello everyone, this is Chris Conde, your Chicken Man, and this is episode 5 of No Croissant, and I'm here with my host.
Hello, I'm David, host of Talking Toku.
And Nick Huber, the host of the Visionary Dawn podcast.
And today, we're here to talk about the unmade Godzilla 2, featuring our special guest, Tab Murphy, the man responsible for writing the treatment.
Happy to be here. Happy to talk about Godzilla in any form. Pleasure. And thank you guys for inviting me in.
So, Tab, can you introduce yourself? I have an understanding that you're a screenwriter, film producer, film director, and television writer. That your Wikipedia tells me.
Well, I am some of those. One of those in particular, which I would say screenwriter. But I have directed a movie. I do have an associate producer credit on the first movie of mine that got made. So I guess that makes me a producer. And I have written some animated series stuff for Cartoon Network, which is where television comes in, I guess. So yes, I guess you could say I'm a multitasker.
Yeah, I mean, on the subject of that, since you brought it up, nowadays, more recently, you've written for Teen Titans Go, Be Cool, Scooby-Doo, and Batman Year One. Is that correct?
Yes, I did Batman Year One and Batman Superman Apocalypse for Warner Brothers, which was awesome. Batman Year One was, great because it was obviously a revered graphic novel by Frank Miller. So when they asked me to adapt it for their version of an animated feature through Warner Brothers Animation, I was like, yeah, kidding me, this is awesome. So I mean, that's as close as to get to writing Batman as I'm going to get. So of course it was a great assignment. I loved it.
And Superman Batman Apocalypse too it's got some great Batman stuff in there too. Like his whole confrontation with Darkseid near the end. That's like some of my favorites.
Oh yeah. No, I really enjoyed that one, and I think they were so happy with the way that turned out that when they decided they were going to do Batman Year One, I'm just fortunate that they came to me to adapt it. So it was, those were they were great projects. I mean, I still to this day, once in a while I'll throw on Batman Year One and I'll watch it. Why wasn't this R-rated? Mainly.
However, you're more known for Tarzan, Atlantis, City of the Lost Empire, and Brother Bear.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, I mean, I was pooping my pants when that movie came out, but I loved Brother Bear when I was a kid.
Oh,
a lot.
Listen, I had a big chunk of my career. I spent 12 years at Disney writing those feature animated films, and that was a great experience. And I when I broke in, my focus was on live action movies. I wanted to be a director. I wanted to write live action, and the very first sort of I would call my big break was writing Grills in the Mist and getting an Oscar nomination for that. So I felt like I was on my way to sort of a career in live action, and all of a sudden this opportunity came up to go into Disney and see what they were working on, and that just ended up being a left turn that I spent 12 years, basically writing 4 movies in a row for them throughout the 90s. So and every one of those movies, I just couldn't say no to, not just because it was Disney, but because every one of those movies really resonated with something in my own childhood. Hunchback of Notre Dame, I knew that story when I was 9 years old because I was a monster nerd growing up in the 60s. And I used to collect a magazine called Famous Monsters at Felllands. Yeah. And so, I was so aware of the canon of Universal monsters back in the day of Frankenstein, Dracula, the Wolfman, and the Hunchback was sort of lumped in with that rogues gallery of monsters for Universal, even though he wasn't a monster. He was a man. So I was aware. I had seen the Lon Chaney Senior silent film. I'd seen the Charles Laughton film growing up as a kid. So I was aware of that. And when they said, in this meeting I ended up going to, that they were trying to figure out if there was a Disney animated movie, and Victor Hugo's novel, I was like, I'm in. I don't care. I want to do that. So that really launched me, into a steady stream of of films. Like when I finished Hunchback, Jeffrey Katzenberg was the head of animation at Disney at the time. He said, "Hey, we're going to do Tarzan. Any interest?" I'm like, "Any interest?" I grew up as a kid watching Johnny White Tarzan. So again, reaching back into my childhood, they were offering me stuff. And then when we did Atlantis, the Lost Empire, with the same directors and producer that did Hunchback, and a great team of artists and everything, they wanted to keep the team together, as it were. And they said, we want to do something different. We want to go into, imagine going into Disneyland. We've been taking a right into Fantasyland for so many movies now. We want to make a left into Adventureland and come up with, a boy's own adventure. And I was like, I'm in, and because all of the movies we all collectively grew up with, adventure movies, I saw as a kid growing up, that became the genesis of Atlantis, the Lost Empire. And we were able to do something. We were able to like pick and choose and like cool stuff from all these movies we loved and create our own sort of, it was a great experience because that movie and those characters were not based on any pre-existing IP. It was something we were allowed to just cook up on our own. So that was fun. And then of course, Brother Bear, I was offered after Atlantis, and I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. So I grew up in the mountains, in the forest. I backpacked, I fished, I did all those things. And so bears and that area of the Pacific Northwest. And additionally, I was big, I schooled myself in Native American culture and history. So when they offered that, I couldn't say no to that either. So thank God they stopped offering me movies. I'd still be writing them,
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even realize, like, when we first met you, that you wrote, like, so many classics. Like, even Atlantis, maybe not be, like, the first movie you think of when you think of Disney animated, but Atlantis is, like, a cult classic. Like,
well,
like, I know a lot of people that grew up with that movie.
Yeah, it's my favorite Disney movie.
Yeah, I appreciate that, guys. And that's here. I'll just share something with you. I was unaware of just how many fans of that movie were out there. I thought for 20 years that I had written, because, when Atlantis got released, it didn't do anything near the numbers that Disney was hoping. And frankly, was considered, at least from the box office perspective, as a disappointment by the studio. And I thought for years I was the only writer that written the first Disney animated flop of all. So and I loved the film. And we all loved the film. And when it came out, it just kind of laid there for a variety of reasons, by the way. Toy Story had just come out. So the writing was on the wall that there was a shift. But when that movie, everybody loved, when it came out, everybody was just heartsick that it didn't perform. Because that's your litmus test of how you're reaching an audience is like the box office, right? What I didn't realize was, as I kind of quietly put that movie into the back of my subconscious and moved on with my career, was that movie found a life on home video that, unlike,
Right.
I mean, people have told me, like, they wore out VHS tapes of that film, ultimately moving to DVD. So during the pandemic, when we were all in lockdown, somebody reached out to me, just like you guys reached out to me to talk about Godzilla, who runs a podcast, but it's all Disney. And she asked if she could talk about Atlantis, and nobody had asked to talk about Atlantis for 20 years. I said, sure. Okay, let's talk about Atlantis. So we had this wonderful, 45 minutes, and she asked me about film and all this stuff, and I kind of remembered all this stuff, and I thought, yeah, it was a great experience. And at the end of it, she goes, Tab, I don't think you realize how many fans of this movie are out there right now today. It is like, and I didn't realize. So she turned me on to a couple of Facebook pages, groups, fan groups. So I was able to connect with a fan base that I thought I didn't even know existed, for all those years. So that was gratifying to know that there is a big fan base for that movie out there now. And so it's been a lot of fun. I send posters to fans, stuff like that. It's great.
One of
despite it being kind of a cult classic, it's nowadays definitely considered to be like one of the best of the like Disney Renaissance, right alongside Hunchback of Notre Dame too. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm proud of that movie, and I'll tell you why. Because we're all aware now in Hollywood, there's this push for diversity, there's this push for all of this sort of PC-ness, like but we were ahead of the curve, man. Because when you look at the group we assembled, we had the first person of color as a principal, the Disney princess, Kita. And we weren't there. Nobody was over our shoulder saying, you gotta do it. We were just like, let's do all this stuff. Let's do all this stuff that hasn't been done. We sort of like embraced it naturally, organically. All right. So it was in some ways, ahead of its time with regard to casting and characters and all of that sort of thing. And, but I still love it. I watch it, every 5 or 10 years. I reconnect to it and I go, wow, we actually made a very cool movie. So it's very cool that there is a fan base out there that not only has grown, but has always kind of been there for that movie that I was unaware of. So it's really cool to find out.
Yeah.
Something you're going to love is that I saw the movie in the theaters at the time it came out in 2001, and I still have my VHS tape.
Nick, let me just tell you, I appreciate hearing that sort of stuff, but I have gotten fans reaching out to me because, I made my presence known on the fan pages and I go on there once in a while and I'll drop some tidbit or I'll post an early draft of a outline for the movie and all this shit. And they're just so appreciative of like, oh my God, any little thing you can send our way. We want to know more. But I have had so many fans reach out to me and say, I'm in linguistics because of Milo Thatch, because of that movie. Or, Princess Kita was such a strong character at a time in my development that, I'm now doing this. I'm working as a lawyer for social justice, but I can trace it all the way back to Kita or Esmeralda, even in The Hunchback. So it's been really gratifying to listen, guys, as an artist, all you hope is that the things you create reach an audience and maybe have some sort of impact, whether that's just to make them laugh or to scare them if it's a scary movie or whatever. That's all you do as a writer, as an illustrator, as a director. You want, people to see your work and be moved by it. So even though it's been a little late in coming, I have been very moved by fans coming to me and telling me they have to tell me the stories of what those movies meant to them growing up and how they either got them through a dark period or whatever, so it's been really cool to understand that the work I did that 10 years and everybody associated with those movies did have an effect on people. So.
Yeah, Milo definitely rubbed off on me because I collect a lot of art books and little stuff like that. I have a bunch of Godzilla 98 material, like the Godzilla 98 kits, the art of Godzilla 98, that kind of stuff, just to talk about, like, keep you focusing with the podcast right here.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm glad all of that material from Godzilla 98 probably didn't cost you much.
The characters from Atlantis I know they're like so iconic. Like you even got like Doja Cat, who's like a massive artist right now, cosplaying Kita.
Exactly. I mean, it's still in the sort of the consciousness, in the cultural consciousness, and because it's being brought back by people who, it made an impression on when they were young. So I say more power to you. Doja, everybody else, cosplay Kita. Go for it.
I did want to ask you about Gorillas in the Mist, which is a film I wasn't too familiar with, but it was a nominee for an Academy Award, which you apparently skipped the ceremony to go yellowtail fishing in the Baja.
I had to bring that up, didn't you? But, I've always said I have no regrets in my life except one. I guess that is it. Because, I was nominated for an Academy Award pretty early in my career and I was pretty young. And so And I knew I wasn't going to win because I had already sussed out the competition, and I knew in all likelihood that Chris Hampton was going to win for Dangerous Liaisons, a movie that he wrote, and then he did win actually. So I just thought, and a buddy like there's a hot yellowtail bite in Baja, and I thought, I don't know, Academy Awards or hot yellowtail bite, and I chose the hot yellowtail bite, and thinking, I'll just go next year when I'm nominated, or the year after. What's the big deal? So the hubris of youth. I've never been nominated again, so yeah, I would probably go to the Academy Awards if I were to go back in time,
Right.
and rethink that particular moment, knowing what I know now. But what do you know when
I mean, you got nominated for one other prestigious award. I mean, you've actually been nominated for a Razzie for worst written film, grossing over $100 million for The Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Yeah, that's the stupidest award. I mean, first of all, if I wrote it, they should have. I mean, if they'd have given me a Razzie for like My Best Friend is a Vampire, I would have been like, I've been proud of it. But Hunchback is actually a very well written script by not only myself but 2 or 3 other writers that contributed material. So that just felt like, I don't know about that one for Razzie.
Yeah, I think
maybe an Annie, but not a Razzie.
I think Holly Berry didn't Holly Berry show up for her Razzie?
Yeah, which I would have.
Yeah,
I would have shown up if they would have nominated something worthy of a Razzie. And I've got a few, believe me.
I just want to say,
everybody loved that.
Maybe you would have been nominated for another Academy Award if Godzilla 2 would have been made. You never know.
No, dude, Godzilla 2 sweep, bro, at the Academy Awards.
I'll tell you what could have happened with Godzilla 2 is that I may have won a Japanese award, because I think and you guys are sort of like, we've teased Godzilla 98 a bit, but my thing with it was, by the time they asked me to write it, I was already deep into collecting Godzilla. I loved Godzilla as a kid. Again, I could trace right back to my childhood watching Godzilla versus the Thing in 1964. I was 7 or 8 years old on the big screen in my hometown of Olympia. When that freaking tail comes up out of the sand and starts moving around, I was just like, what is going on here? It was, so when they asked me to write it, I had no qualms at all. But as I got more into it, I was hoping to, like, in the sequel, steer things a little bit more back to a traditional telling of Godzilla and that sort of thing. And anyway, and whether they would have whether they would have changed the design or anything at that point, I doubt. But
before we start talking about the script itself, that actually did remind me, because according to your IMDb, which you may or may not have written yourself, because I only say that because you did leave out the Razzie.
Well, does my IMDb say I wrote Star Wars? Because I did put that in. Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
We'll put it back in. Don't worry.
Yeah, no, we'll update it right after. Well, it's also going to get updated with No Croissant.
Oh, perfect.
So, you attended Washington State University, where you studied forestry and wildlife biology, before transferring to USC Film School. So, did your background, because both Godzilla 98 and this Godzilla 2 treatment, what I find interesting is, even though it does it in like a very like silly sci-fi 90s movie way, I do like how Godzilla 98 kind of taps into Godzilla's biological functions, and his both biological, like, reproduction and his behavior. Like, it's very reminiscent of like an actual iguana. So, of course, in this script that we'll be talking about soon, Godzilla lays eggs. There's a runt. There's it's a return to form, but it's still kind of grounded in like the first movie's like kind of biological premise. So I guess is your background as a wildlife biologist, did that inspire the work you did on the script or even in other movies?
Sure, certainly, certainly. I mean, as I mentioned, I grew up in the Pacific Northwest. I always loved the outdoors, and I, for a time, believed that I wanted a career in the outdoors. Either as a wildlife biologist or as a forest ranger or something to that effect. Uh, and when I sort of made the choice to pivot and go south to Hollywood, and pursue what was really my sort of latent passion that I never thought in a million years I even considered, because it was so far away from what I knew, what I grew up with, et cetera, et cetera. But I had this sort of mini kind of crisis where I felt like that even at Washington State University and pursuing this idea that I wanted to work in the outdoors and be a wildlife biologist, that I wasn't on the path I was meant to be on. And so when I really sort of thought about it, as wild and crazy as it sounded, I felt the real answer was I wanted to go to Hollywood and make movies and write movies and things like that. So I did that, but I never gave up. I never gave up my passion and my interest in this other area. So yes, I mean, I think a lot of that interest and that passion is in the DNA of a lot of things I've written over the course of my career, including Godzilla 2. The movie I ended up directing back in 1994, a movie called Last of the Dogmen. Really, if you look at that movie, that's all of those things I was pursuing. My love of native culture, native history, my love of the outdoors, my love of, sort of what if movies, all of that is represented in that movie, which I ended up, was able to write and direct. So yeah, I mean, Godzilla 2, I just was fascinated by the biology, by the, trying to ground it in some sort of organic reality, a little bit, about about the science of it all.
Right.
And so, yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly about David, but I know me and Nick are kind of biology animal nerds. So I think that's why.
Not so much.
Oh man, yeah, I think that's why we have like kind of I think that's kind of why we have an attraction to this. I mean, I got my gecko down there. I got my chickens and my dog. I really relate to your story because I used to want to be a vet.
Yeah, that's funny. My son is working as a vet assistant right now.
Oh
So
man,
he loves it.
yeah, I have high respect for people that like work in that field, but
Yeah.
I wanted to do art.
biologist.
Yeah, marine. I'm sure I'm a marine biologist too in another universe because that shit's.
Listen, there's nothing wrong with having multiple interests and having, sort of like, obviously you have to pick something
Right.
and that commands your focus in order to create a career and a living, et cetera, et cetera. But I think, having all sorts of multiple interests and being well versed in those interests is awesome. I mean, that's, I don't, it certainly, in terms of me and the stories I've written, has shown up in so many movies like Tarzan, I mean, all of that, Gorillas in the Mist, of course, was right in my wheelhouse at a time when I was really struggling to get I'd had jobs, but I hadn't had that one break that, sort of pushes you into the upper echelon of opportunity in Hollywood. And that came along, and it was just like, it couldn't have been more perfect in terms of what my likes and passions were about. The idea of a woman who was spending her life in the jungles of Rwanda and not initially studying mountain gorillas, who were shy, retiring creatures that no one had really shined a light on. But then ultimately having to sort of like, in conjunction with studying them, protect them, because they were being, killed by poachers, and babies were being sold to zoos and things. So she was a fascinating character, but just for me to go over there after I wrote that script while they were in production, to hike into the jungles and see the gorillas, sit with them, look in their eye. I mean, that was amazing. I mean, to the point where that's all I did over there. I didn't even go on the set, because movie sets are boring, guys. I'm sorry. But it's funny too, because I knew everybody associated with the making of the film. I'd met Michael Apted, I'd met the producers, I'd met, everybody. And when I was there staying on the mountain, I'd met Brian Brown, who's in that movie as well, an actor. The one person I never met was Sigourney Weaver.
Wow.
And I know, right? And also in all fairness, I co-wrote that movie, so there was another writer as well. But I had never met her personally. And so a few weeks back, I got an invitation, because I'm a member of the Academy, to go to a screening of Avatar 2. And then they were going to have a reception. The screening was at the El Cap in Hollywood. And then they were going to have a reception at the Roosevelt Hotel. Jim Cameron was going to be there. Everybody, Sigourney Weaver was supposed to be there. And so I thought, well, shoot, why don't we go see the movie and then go to this reception? And sure enough, we went there, and there she was, and an old director friend of mine, not that he's old, but a director friend of mine that I've known for a few years, Randall Kleiser, who directed Grease and some other cool movies. He's like, Sigourney's here, Tab. So he paved the way for me to go say hello to her. She was awesome. So I finally got a picture with her after all these years.
Very nice.
Circle, yeah.
You're gonna have to show us.
Yeah, no, I'll send it to you.
Awesome. Dude, I don't know about you guys. I'm a big Sigourney fan, so I'm pretty jealous of that.
100%.
Yeah, I think everyone loves Sigourney Weaver.
Yeah, when she was making Aliens and, like, I was working at a 7-Eleven, down by Universal Studios. I'm just hoping someday I could work with somebody like that, or So it was great to come full circle. She was such a sweetheart. We talked about those days, her making the movie, et cetera, et cetera. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've never seen Gorillas of the Mist. Matter of fact, when I heard about it, I thought it was going to be like a horror movie.
Girls of the Mist? Did you say?
No. Maybe.
Yeah, I think you're mixing up your porno, pal, with
Dude, look, bro.
It's a quick story. So this buddy of mine has over on the Big Island in Hawaii, he's got this film production studio, etc. There's a film class in Kona that is taught, and so I went over there to work on a project with him, and he goes, "Hey, the teacher of the film students that they have a building near here, found out you're here, and he wonders if he can show Gorillas in the Mist to a student." And I'm like, "Sure." I haven't seen that movie in like 20 years, So that night, all the students are there, and there's probably 30, and they're all in their kind of early 20s, girls and guys, and all film students. They watch the movie, and so I was like, "Oh, the movie holds up. It's pretty good, And so we have this Q&A afterwards. I'm on stage and the moderator, and we're it's not a huge theater, small theater, and they're very respectful, all the kids, and they ask a few questions. But this is a movie that was made long before they were born, right? So. Then the moderator says, "Okay, well, thank you all very much. And oh, by the way, you may not know, but Tab wrote also Hunchback, Tarzan, Atlantis, Brother Bear," and that fucking room just exploded. Oh my God. And then they were like, I swear to God, they were like in a line 20 deep to get a selfie with me. Wait till my mom hears that I met you. And that girl was crying. And I was like, that is the time I realized the power of those Disney movies. It blew my mind, man. It just blew my mind. It was so funny. Anyway, okay, I digress.
Yeah, that concludes this episode of No Bananas.
No bananas.
Yeah, so we do have a couple more questions before we deep dive into the Godzilla 2 story. I did want to ask, how was your friendship with Dean Devlin and Roland Emmerich, and how did that lead to your opportunity writing for Godzilla 2?
so that story is connected to the movie I was trying to get made as a director, because the same producer I had on that movie, which is Last of the Dogman. Is your mom calling you? Oh, sorry. He looks. Are you okay?
Yeah, there's like some weird noises. If someone's getting murdered up there, it's I'm not involved.
It's okay,
Just keep
Chris.
going.
We can see behind you, so if
I hope
anything
it doesn't
happens,
happen
we'll
on
warn
Zoom,
you.
man. Yeah.
Yeah, I live in the
Uh,
basement, so there's weird noises.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough. Anyway, so the producer of Last of the Dogman was also producing Stargate, a movie that those guys were making in Yuma, Arizona. They were on location. I don't know if you've seen Stargate, but it's it's like it's sci-fi kind of thing. And so the producer said, "Why don't you come down to Yuma and hang out on the set and get to just see how everything works and blah blah blah." And I had no set experience, and I said, "Okay, that's cool." So I went down there and I met Dean and I met Roland. We got on great. I mean, we just became friends, and Dean was awesome and Roland was great. He was great knowledge of film, and so we would, after a day's shoot, they were very generous too. They let me come to dailies. They let me hang out on the set. They let me go. So it was really cool. And the thing is, when everybody's working on a movie, aside from the director and the producer, most of the crew, they're always on the lookout for their next job. So word got around that I was there, that I was going to go off and direct a movie after those guys were done. And some of the crew got a copy of the script and it got passed around. So they were like, wow, this would be cool. And so I ended up using most of Dean and Roland's crew to go off and make my movie when they were done shooting Stargate. And so that's how I became friends with those guys. And I stayed in touch with them. And I was on the set, when they shot back in here in LA. They shot down in a big set that they built for Stargate. So I kept going down, just hanging out with them, chatting, and then they went off to make Independence Day, and so I saw those guys while they were making that, and afterwards they were so excited, and I was so happy for their success. And then they asked me if I would write an idea for a movie they had, which became a spec script. I got paid for it. In fact, I ended up writing a couple of things for them that never got made, to be honest with you. But then they came to me and said, "Hey, after Godzilla," they said, "we're doing a sequel. We'd love for you to write it." I said, "I'm in." I loved Godzilla as a character for the time I was a kid. So they kind of let me know. They were off making a movie called The Patriot with Mel Gibson in those days. And so I flew to, I want to say, Charlotte, North Carolina, and they were down at a place called Rock Hill shooting big battle scenes and everything. So I went down, flew all the way out there for some meetings that would take place after the day of shooting, talking about Godzilla. What could be the sequel? What could, and so there were some ideas and this and that, and what direction could it take? And so we kind of, brainstormed a bunch of shit, but they were great because they were like, okay, that's kind of, we're busy making a movie. We're going to just leave it to you, Tab. You show us something that we can turn into a movie, and yeah, we'll do it. So I had quite a bit of leeway, to go off and create a direct sequel to the Godzilla 98 movie. But I felt like, that movie, really was kind of contained in New York and all of that stuff. I wanted to open it up. I wanted to open it up sort of like globally. That was, make whatever threat to the world and to Godzilla was going to take us on a, like a James Bond style. We're here, we're there, we're in Australia, we're back, we're in we're all over the place, So I, but what you've read is what I put before Dean and Roland, and they loved it. They thought it was great. And they thought it was great. And Sony wanted to do it, but they did not want to give them the budget that the treatment needed to make the movie, in a way that both Roland and Dean felt comfortable with. So it really, what it came down to was money. And that is because I think Godzilla 98 didn't quite do the type of business that Sony was really hoping. It did well, it did okay. So I think they sort of balked at the number that Dean and Roland were willing to produce the sequel to, millions and millions of dollars. I think they capped it at, like, I don't know what they capped it at. I'd just be guessing, but it wasn't what Roland felt comfortable making the movie. So they walked away.
Yeah. I heard a rumor about that floating around for a long time, but I never figured out if it was true or not about the budget being the issue.
It was the issue. Yeah. I mean, I think everybody kind of read the script and goes, okay, it's cool, but can we do it for a price? And the price Sony wanted to do it for, just, Dean and Roland said, that we just can't do it for that. We need to do it for, a budget that'll let us make the movie we envision. And that's where the sort of the dividing line was between Sony and those guys. And I think they felt, instead of redoing a treatment and doing a cut rate version, I think they said, you know what? I think they had other things going too that they were interested in. And rather than doing a sequel to Godzilla, they decided to just move forward and do other things that were on their plate. And I think if Sony had said, great, guys, whatever you want, we'll make it, let's do it, they may have done it. They may have done the sequel. But as it turned out, I didn't even get a chance to write the script, because based on the treatment, all those decisions were made.
So, and you touched on something I did want to ask you. So, were you a fan of the classic Toho Godzilla? And after that, I did want to ask what your thoughts are on the new American Godzilla movies, the ones that did get made.
Yeah, sure. Well, of course I was a fan of I think I've got on record saying that Godzilla movies in particular, but that character made an impression on me at a very early age. So, I mean, and over the years, through all those movies, Godzilla has evolved and, et cetera, and his look and all this sort of thing. But when those guys told me that I was, that they wanted me to write it, and this is before I'd gone back east of the page. This is, there was some time for me to just kind of sit with it and think about it. I started looking around. First, I went and watched some movies, some Godzilla movies. I caught up on some Godzilla movies, specifically the ones made in the early 90s, like Godzilla versus Mothra, what they call the Heisei movies, right?
The Heisei,
the Godzilla versus Mothra, Godzilla, versus Biollante, and, Godzilla versus Destroyer. And as I watched more of these, I thought, they're fucking cool, man. That's cool. And then I realized there were toys available, and I thought, well, I'll buy a few.
That's always how it starts. That's how it starts.
How it starts.
He specifically purchased $2,000 worth of toys.
So I thought, I'll just put them on my desk for inspiration. Because, they were talking about a sequel while they were still in production on Godzilla. And, if you remember, there was a big secrecy about what Godzilla really looked like. And they tried to keep a lid on that for the longest time. So yeah, I went down a rabbit hole, as we all have. And I ended up collecting a lot of stuff. And I ended up getting, I'm totally obsessed with needing to collect certain lines of figures. Most of them, my favorites were always Bandai. And I remember there was one Godzilla figure that they called the Glitter Godzilla. It was like the gold ring of Godzilla collecting. Like, if you could get a Glitter Godzilla, and I did. I found one with a box.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
So those things go for tens of thousands of dollars almost?
I paid $800 for it.
Oh my god.
But I paid $800 for it back in 1990, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
So who knows what it goes for now? But so I was obsessed. I was obsessed, and eBay was just about the only kind of avenue you could, as a collector, could find cool stuff people would put up, and they hated me on eBay because I was making enough money that I pretty much outbid everybody all the time for what I wanted, and paid probably way more than I needed to. But I just cut the trip down. Fuck that guy, But then I got a conduit to eBay Japan, and then I got guys that were looking for stuff for me. I had a network. I mean, I don't want to go too much into it, but yeah, I was over the top. But I had a great collection for a while.
Well, so
So all of that, while I was collecting all of that stuff, I was also, sort of like trying to figure out what this next iteration, the sequel, could be. Of course, Godzilla came out. I'll be honest with you, I wasn't a big fan of the way it looked. It felt more lizard-like in so many ways than the other iterations, and so that's fine. That's a creative choice. I knew Patrick Tatopoulos. I mean, I knew what they were kind of thinking about. So it came out, and I remember going to see it and going, okay, this is cool. This was kind of fun, but not in my back of my mind. It's not really a Godzilla movie. It's kind of a giant iguana movie. Anyway. Yeah. So then I went to work on the treatment. I think I worked up a head of steam by then with all this. My office turned into Godzilla shrine, and I just tried to come up with something that I thought would be unique and kind of fun, and to know Roland, he loves big sort of action scenes and that sort of thing. I tried to throw as much of that in there as I could, but I tried to also make it a much more emotional story, like human emotional story between humans and Godzilla, and protecting a baby and all this stuff that people can relate to, So yeah, no, it was fun. I had a great time writing it, and I was really disappointed that I didn't get a chance to even write the script. That whole project was sort of cut off at the knees by this kind of loggerhead, that had come to fruition over the budget. So it was too bad.
So what did you think of the new American Godzilla movies? In your professional opinion, are they more in line with what I guess people were expecting back in the day when 98 came out?
I have to, in all honesty, I have to say that I haven't seen them all. Okay. Sorry. I saw the one with King Kong versus Godzilla.
Right.
And now, ironically, my partner was asked to give notes on the script for the sequel, which I have read.
Oh, interesting.
Interesting.
But
man,
I can't really say too much because she had to sign an NDA, and if it got back to her that I was the one that let you guys know and you spread it all over, they would probably be like,
don't worry. This podcast title will be Tab leaks entire script for.
Chris, you kept going on about how you wanted a clickbait title. Here it is.
Tab confirmed.
I will say a couple of words that will resonate with location. Middle Earth.
Well, I think that's a given because they're
Yeah, but I know
they explored Hollow Earth in the last film.
That's
and
not
yeah.
Middle Earth.
I was like, yeah, Middle Earth.
That's Tolkien. Whoops, yes, it's a mashup. Lord of the Rings and Godzilla.
That would make a shitload of money, I'm sure.
He crosses into the Lord of the Rings universe.
Oh man, yeah. Hollow Earth.
Hollow Earth.
Hollow Earth seems to be their, I don't know. Do you call it a plot device? It's just like it's like MCU's alternate universe bullshit. Just to like, explain everything happening. It's like, oh yeah, Hollow Earth. It's huge. So it's just like, okay, infinite movies. Now.
Yeah, and radiation's magic in the movie.
Anyway, I think that if you like, I don't know if you like Godzilla versus King Kong, but if you did, this one probably ramps it up.
That's good. That's good to hear. Yeah,
I'm sorry, I just have to take a quick break. I got to let a little kitty out the door.
Oh, sure thing.
Okay, I hear you.
All right, guys. Tab's not here, so what do you folks think about the next Godzilla MonsterVerse film? He's not here. I think he's embarrassed by his Razzie.
Yeah. I didn't even win. I was only nominated by the. If I won, I mean, that would be right on the shelf back there, Kyle.
Oh my god!
Yeah,
all right, so just one more question before we actually finally get into the treatment. So
I gotta go in 5 minutes. What are you, nuts?
Don't worry. So Godzilla the series is, as you may know, is the cartoon adaptation of the film. This plays out as a direct sequel to the movie. However, as we all know now, it's the only sequel to the movie. So it actually shares many of the same story beats in the sense that there's a monster island, there's a baby that hatches and it imprints on Nick. Nick helps it escape and he leads it to water, and then he shows up. Hicks finds him later, fully grown. Like, it's almost like the exact.
I knew that they'd use that, and they didn't pay me a dime.
Yeah, so
I could have taken them to the mat for that. It's the similarities. Everybody pointed them out, but by that time I'd moved on. I didn't really give a shit anymore. Like if they were gonna, I just didn't. It didn't seem worth it to me. Because they would probably fight and say, well, we came up with it's what anybody might come up with in that scenario. It's not just exclusive to your efforts, whatever their reasoning would be. But yeah, I've heard that over the years, and I haven't watched it, to be honest with you. I've never seen it, so I can't really say one thing or another. But I mean, it's similar to something that happened very early in my career, which is I should have had a writing credit on Coming to America, that old Eddie Murphy.
Mm-hmm.
Air Run, yeah. So we won't. Well, that can be for a later podcast when it's a non-Godzilla subject. Talk about. But anyway, that's just I've been doing this for 40 years, guys. You spend enough time in this town, and something bound to happen.
Right.
But I'd rather have it happen early in my career than later. But in this instance, I just didn't want to make a fuss about it. Somebody was, but I heard through the grapevine that there were similarities, that there were parts of it that were used,
So you're saying this isn't, that was not coincidental?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, everybody at Sony read it, Dean and Roland championed it. And so there were a lot of eyes on that treatment, and whether, ultimately the decision to make this animated series, and it probably different enough that they just borrowed maybe a couple of things. It doesn't,
Yeah, I mean, I think there's even like a kind of wasp insect creature later in the series, or multiple maybe, which so maybe one or more of those is.
Damn it! I'm suing now because you mentioned that.
Plot twist. I think there was like 3. So
okay, maybe that's like
so you got to sue 3 separate times, 3 different lawsuits.
I'm calling you guys as witnesses.
You got send one for Steedera, got to send the second one for Queen Bee, and the third one I can't remember.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Even Godzilla versus Megaguirus, right, is a kind of an iteration of what I was going for. And Toho made that one. So, and I know Toho I know they read the treatment too, because they were part of that whole process.
Well, that's 4 losses. You got to sue Toho now.
Okay, come on. There's the fourth one.
My God. Maybe we can retire.
No, you gotta sue us just for good measure.
Anyway, I mean, there's a lot of borrowing, and especially in a genre of movies like this, people, whatever. I mean, it's, like, it just is, it happens, and it's, if it was blatant, if they just absolutely made the treatment I wrote and just, threw it in my face, of course I would have done this by now. But it's so hard to prove that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
Excess accents, number one, and number two, that it was absolutely used the way it was, and all that stuff. Anyway, I respected Dina Roland's decision to walk away from the table at that point, and I did too, sort of emotionally and every other way. So,
Yeah.
good.
Once,
I'm sorry. You want to go ahead, Chris?
I was just gonna say, once some kid stole my homework answer, so I know exactly how you feel today.
Well, yeah, exactly. I'm sure you were paid handsomely for that homework.
So a question I had was, so for the queen, insect monster in the movie, was she partially inspired by Mothra? A lot of people have been asking about that. Is like, were you inspired by Mothra to come up with that?
Well, what was inspired by Mothra was, I think, in the treatment, I had the egg that had been discovered in Sydney, that they'd built this enclosure over it. That was completely Mothra. I mean, that was completely Godzilla versus the Thing, or back in 1964. So yeah, I tried to borrow tropes. I tried to borrow images. I tried to borrow stuff from Godzilla movies that I loved growing up. So was she, though? I mean, we never even got to the point where we were able to produce artwork in support of the the treatment. So, but my vision of her was probably closer to Megaguirus than to Mothra, to be honest with you. Something badass that was scary, like a murder hornet, like mutated murder hornet, was what I was thinking of. And so not so much Mothra, but, a flying insect. Now, I mean, had we gone down the road with this and had we developed it further, who's to say Mothra couldn't have been in this movie?
Right.
In a way, as the antithesis of this flying insect, ravaging the world. She helps Godzilla, or whatever. I mean, we never even got a chance to have those discussions with Rolf.
Yeah. And I did want to ask. Oh yeah, spoiler alert for people who have never read treatment. There is a new monster.
Spoiler alert for a movie that didn't get made. I don't know if I can spoil something like that.
I did want to ask, like, did Roland Emmerich or Dean Devlin give you instructions like, all right, so we want a new monster, or were they like, we only have the rights to Godzilla, so don't put anything else in there? Or
No, they were. So I said to them, look, I mean, what can we do? We can't do a sequel where it's just about Godzilla. We now have to open the world up. We now have to invite, something else in, and we now have to, we have to address this idea at the end of Godzilla 98, Matthew Broderick's character in Godzilla, he watches Godzilla die, and he is very affected by that. And so I was like, we need to, so here's what has to happen in the sequel, in my opinion. We need to develop, if you want Nick Totopoulos to be in the movie again, his character, then he has to be more than just wanting to study these creatures. He has to have some sort of relationship with them, with this new, and how do we, I worked out this idea that he found the baby and he released it, and it recognizes him several years later, and it's now big, and all that sort of imprinting, all of that's biology, all of that's, that happens in the wild, So I thought that's the way to create a relationship between Nick and the Godzilla that stars in this movie. And so, yeah, I mean, and they were like, and I said, we need a new threat. Cannot be Godzilla. This is the turn where Godzilla protects, you guys had him destroying in the first movie. That's awesome. But, the legacy of Godzilla is ultimately he's a protector, not, later on, of course, in some of the other movies, he's a bit of a destroyer. But I said that way, we need to open up the movie. We need to invite another monster in. We need to, deliver on the promise of what Godzilla movies have been delivering for decades, right? So they were all in. They were totally agreed with it,
It's awesome. Real quick, if you could give the insect monster a canon color scheme, let's say what color would the murder hornet be? Asking for a friend who wants to draw the thing up.
I was about to ask Nick, are you asking for a reason here?
Yes.
I envision it as a sort of how it has kind of a waspy thing, including a thorax and an abdomen and all of these things but I imagine the top half would be almost black with just red eyes and really scary sort of mandibles, and that the bottom half would have been, where you could play with a color scheme for the abdomen. And that the stinger would be one of these things that would retract, but when it came out, it was just wicked, serrated, edged, fucking go through boats, go through metal, kind of thing. And I got stung enough as a kid growing up, so this was my revenge for all those yellow jackets.
Yeah, that's also it's reminding me of a yellow jacket.
Nick, that description reminds me of Tab probably won't know what the fuck I'm talking about, but do you remember when Godzilla Unleashed, the video game, they originally had a set of monsters that they had fans vote on, and one of them was the lightning bug.
Yeah, the lightning bug. That's right.
Yeah. I don't know, just kind of reminds you of that, except with the stinger at the end.
Yeah.
Well, that would have been cool. And that's a great thing about being in a room with really creative, fun people. It's somebody could have said, well, in addition to this wasp creature, maybe it has this ability, to rally the other wasp by its abdomen glows like a lightning bug. And everybody, and the rest of them come, and then they fucking attack at night. Yeah. What could have been?
So, brief history. Sony originally wanted to produce a trilogy, and they obtained the rights to Godzilla back in '92. After the first film's success, pre-production of the sequel began shortly after, with a treatment being written by Tab Murphy. And then I wrote, I don't know if this is the exact, I kept this pretty vague because obviously I don't know the exact reason why this was canned, but I did write lack of enthusiasm for the audience, critics, and other creative differences, obviously Roland Emmerich and D definitely not exactly getting the budget they asked for.
Yeah, that was the main reason. That was the main reason.
And then,
I mean, creatively, you can always kind of solve shit, really. I mean, if you really want to make it, but when you're not given enough money to, make the movie you want to make, it's really, it's fish or cut bait time, and they cut bait, and I think they walked away and immediately moved on to other things. So
yeah, I mean, and then Toho came back out of early retirement and released Godzilla 2000, which there's some rumors that Sony wanted to make a sequel to Godzilla 2000, but it seems like something that was either briefly considered or didn't happen, because I just found it on Wikipedia.
I want to say there's a treatment floating around for that film as well.
Really?
Yeah, I believe so.
Oh shit.
Yeah, I remember there was an article published on it, and the idea was absurd. Godzilla would have ended up in a coma, and then he fights a volcano bat monster or something.
Why did we interview this guy? We should have found
I believe that the article on that is on our good friend Keith Aiken's website, Sci-Fi Japan.
Oh, yeah. Tab. Yeah, Tab should know Keith, yeah. We just interviewed Keith last week.
Oh, did you? Great.
Yeah.
Well, you're gonna have to have Steve Rifle on. He's fun to talk to.
Maybe.
I can reach out to him if you want. If you don't, that's fine too.
I think I might be friends with him on Facebook, so I can.
I might be too. We're trying to find like Patrick Stopoulos. I am in contact with one of the stars of the movie who is deeply considering being on the show, but they didn't seem that enthusiastic about it. So we'll see how that goes. But we're just trying to, we're this whole show is like a love letter to like a very niche topic. And I mean, to be honest, like, I guess, I don't know. I don't want to say joke of this podcast because we all did grow up on this movie and we do like this movie. But I guess, like,
I get it.
What's like, I guess, like, the whole goal though was like, how long can I stretch out this one movie that has like 17% on Rotten Tomatoes and stretch it out into like this long, actually interesting show?
That's funny. I mean, I recall you saying originally you wanted to do 10 episodes. This is already episode 5, I want to say. So we're halfway there. It's up to you.
Dude, we don't. I got the whiteboard up on my wall. We still got to talk about the video games, the Stan Winston movie, the marketing. I even have, like, as an extra, I have Reptilian written down. Which if Tab doesn't know, Reptilian is, it's like kind of like, it's basically the 90s equivalent to like one of those Asylum movies, but it was like a Godzilla 98 ripoff.
Really?
But it was also a remake of a 1960s Korean monster movie as well, Yongari.
Yeah, Yongari.
Oh, Yongari. I know Yongari.
Yeah. It was the remake of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
In the movie, Yongari even destroys a Godzilla 98 poster. It's
and there's a line
subtle, but
and there's a line in the movie where the military's fighting him, and they said, compared to this guy, Godzilla's a pussy.
Yeah, how did that movie do?
I don't even think I've seen it all the way through.
oh yeah, no kidding, man. That is wild. Well, I was conflicted because I didn't want to walk away from it. I wanted to write it, and I was hoping against hope that Legendary and Sony would like bring me, at least give me first pass at whatever they were going to do later down the road. But that never happened either. I'm sure they associated me with those 2 other guys.
You're
you're on team Devlin and Emmerich. Get out of here, man.
Yeah. Before we jump to the next thing, something I wanted to ask you was, what did you think about Godzilla 2000 when that came out shortly after?
I was disappointed. I mean, again, Toho has made some great movies, and they've made some not so great Godzilla movies. It always comes down to story for me. It always comes down to story. Like fucking Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla '93, that is great. Godzilla versus Destroyer is also one of my favorites, but there just was better, sharper writing, better, So Godzilla 2000 just felt, I don't know, it didn't quite resonate with me the way some of those others that I consider sort of classics, did. And
I mean, I love 2000. It's definitely not one of Toho's strongest.
no, I just didn't. It's just
2000, I think, resonates with a lot of people from like our generation because it got that big wide release here in the States. So it was a lot of people's first Godzilla.
It did well. It did well.
Yeah.
It did well. I don't even recall if I went to see it on the big screen, but I think I saw it and I was like, sometimes you watch a movie and you go, what could have been? And that's what I felt about that one. What could have been? I mean, they had all the stuff there, just didn't. But to me, it always comes down to the writing, the story. And, I just felt like that one fell a bit short.
Yeah, to be fair, it did have a very kind of rushed production from how...
the whole thing felt rushed. That's my problem, Although I did end up with speaking of collecting, I did end up with one of the short fin things off the suit.
Oh, wow.
Oh, very cool.
Nice. Very cool.
I know. I
I met the guy who built the suit. Shinichi.
Oh, yeah. I David, did you meet him? Because
Wakasa? Yes. Yeah.
oh, we don't met him. Oh, okay. Yeah, Wakasa. He's a G. He did a lot of the Heisei movies too, right? And a lot of the Millennium movies. Yeah, he's been around. I mean, there was a picture of him with I think he's friends with Patrick, and
He is.
there's pictures of him with the '98 like Macatton suit. So
Oh, is
he's-
that right? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, the Toho, they were kept abreast of all that, the look of it. So they were the ones ultimately, I think that, I don't know if they had final approval, but I know Dean and Roland were adamant about moving away from the traditional look
Great.
of Godzilla
Mm.
and wanted to make it their own. They wanted to make something that was, and they did.
I mean that reminds me on like an unrelated tangent. But this happened recently, and it's not every day you get like Godzilla 1998 news. So I did want to mention it.
Mm.
The official like Sony like prop social media. Did you guys see this? They pulled out one of the baby suits, and they did like a skit. Yeah, and they did like a skit with it where they wheeled the baby around and they like overlaid like a voice and stuff.
How? When was this?
Like
It was
last week.
Like last week.
I have not
Did you
seen
not?
this.
Okay, we gotta send in the group. It was so.
Please. Yeah.
First off, the suit looks great considering it hasn't been touched in like 25 years.
Yeah.
But second off, it was like, who asked for this? Why?
like he's like, it's like I'm going to the studio, need my access card to sign in. Oh, there's Bob over there. Hi, Bob.
It's like-
What's the suit?
Well, you guys have seen all those TikTok videos of the T-Rex suit walking
Oh yeah,
around everywhere.
100%.
Every time I see that gives me Godzilla '98 PTSD. It looks like one of the babies.
Oh man. Yeah, and that's something we touched on a few times. Like Godzilla '98, like I mean, it's very, 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 very far from the typical Toho form, but I think it's still a hell of a lot like more faithful than like people give it credit for, especially in like dude, it was an American movie. They totally could have gone all CGI, but they actually did use classic Godzilla suitmation for some of the scenes and for both Godzilla and the babies, and even miniatures, which I own some of the miniatures over there. So,
Right.
I don't know. I appreciate it for that.
There were also artistic choices that were a bit divisive amongst the Godzilla fans too. I mean, Roland chose to shoot a lot of sequences, rain in the dark, and there were sequences where Godzilla wasn't all that visible, until the like late movie, and even it just was an interesting choice. I mean, a lot of those sequences were shot at night, right? So it's just an aesthetic that I would obviously, if you read the treatment for the sequel, moved away from immediately. There was not going to be any confusion that this was going to be a dark, kind of brooding, night, raining shit going on while all this destruction is happening. So,
And that's common.
yeah.
Hey, Godzilla did it. Godzilla King of the Monsters did it. Godzilla vs. Kong did it. Let's see. Rim did it.
With that weird one.
Yeah, Pacific Rim did it. I mean, I get it. It looks good, but
Yeah.
you gotta give like, I like how in Cloverfield, if you've ever seen Cloverfield,
Yeah, I love Cloverfield.
yeah, I like how most of the scenes are at night of the monster, and you kind of don't get like a good look at it until the very end when he eats T.J. Miller. You get like a nice clean view in the daytime of it, and then you fully get to like get up close and personal with this monster. It's so cool. Such a great scene. Oh,
You
sorry.
can get away with that when the monster is new, when it's something But you can't get away with that with Godzilla.
Exactly.
Just decades and decades of people of this creature being beloved or hated or whatever, but always being shown. So it was an interesting choice, I thought. But anyway, I mean, you never saw him in broad daylight stalking across the land,
Right?
destroying it. It just was they just decided to go for a look, and that was it. So
Yeah. There was an earlier shot in Cloverfield where when they're escaping through the helicopter, you see a really good shot of his whole body, like stepping through the buildings, and then he gets hit by the
Yeah.
bomb. And yeah.
Oh yeah, Nick. They not to go on another tangent, but in Godzilla King of the Monsters, the new one, there's a scene where they're showing all the Titans, and there's this big spider Titan, and they're showing like news clips and stuff, and when they're showing the spider Titan, it looks suspiciously like that exact shot. And according to my friend, who I won't name because they were under NDA, he saw an early screening, and he told me that they were like using like a lot of like stock like music and stuff and footage. Apparently that scene just straight up uses that Cloverfield footage.
What? Really?
So they must have like literally copied it 1-to-1
Yeah.
by the time they released it.
Wow.
It's interesting.
That is
And to go on another Cloverfield tangent, there was a rumor when that movie, when that trailer first dropped, that it was gonna be sequel to 98, which is hilarious.
10 years after the fact.
10 years.
yeah. No. Look, man, fans' imaginations, by the way, are ever expanding.
Look, as much as that wouldn't happen, I do kind of like the idea of like a Godzilla movie that like isn't marketed as one, and like you only find out at the end. I mean, M. Night Shyamalan did that with Split. At the end, it's revealed it. At the end, it's revealed it's what's it called? Fuck, the movie before. It's an Unbreakable sequel, but it only gets revealed to the end. So, can you do that with Godzilla? Absolutely not. But it would have been cool.
I was going to say he would not make it as a studio executive, my friend.
Right.
You know,
if you were suggesting that, but that's okay.
you know what would have been hilarious? It's like for the trailer, like all the Cloverfield trailers are just like what they were. Let's just say it was going to be a Godzilla 98 sequel. Then right at the like near the end of the trailer, it does the title card thing, but it says "Guess who does matter," and it says Godzilla. Like so, the sign does matter. It's like guess who still matters.
Oh my god, that was such a dumb fucking.
It was.
So good. Anyway, I guess we should actually talk about the treatment now.
Yeah, I gotta sign off at 6, gentlemen.
Oh damn. So,
Yeah.
okay. So is that in 30 minutes?
Yeah, like 25 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. I'll keep track of that. So the treatment picks up where the first movie leaves off. Godzilla is dead, and Nick searches for any remaining babies at Madison Square Garden. Nick finds a hatchling who immediately sees Nick and imprints onto him. Becoming very fond of the creature, Nick assists the creature by disguising him in an overcoat and leading him in the water.
So actually, I have a question about that. Was that at all inspired by the Marvel comic where that exact thing happens?
Fuck you, David. I was gonna ask that. Fuck you, David.
What Marvel comic? Is it a Godzilla comic?
It's a Godzilla comic. In the 70s, Marvel had the rights to do Godzilla comic, and that's, I think Hank Pym, Ant-Man, shrunk him down to like get rid of him or something.
Oh, is that right? Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I will. No, I wasn't aware of that, but no, I thought it would. I was the baby Nick finds is not as big as the babies that were around in the 98 movie. You have to understand it probably small, so he could put a coat around it, right? Yeah. And I just thought the bit with the bum coming up and asking for money and this thing lunging at it and him screaming and I thought that would be fun, to do something like that. And then ultimately tough love of Nick having to, scare, throw a rock at it or scream at it or get away, that's a trope. We've seen it, but it would have been cool on the Godzilla movie.
I genuinely thought that was a like deliberate Marvel reference, because I just sent you the panel on Facebook. It's I forgot. It's been like 8, almost probably 10 years since I've read this comic, so it's been a while. But I do remember this issue. They literally hide him in like a hat and like a jacket, and they like walk him down the street. It's the worst disguise ever.
All I can say is great minds think alike.
Yeah, and man, and this scene, like in general, like just makes you almost kind of wish this movie did come out, because it just screams at like kind of early 2000s, late 90s kind of like movie humor.
Like, oh yeah.
All right, so after an entire village disappears, a cruise ship found adrift, and a jet ski is sliced in half near Australia. General Hicks and his team is tasked with investigating these anomalies. Felipe kidnaps Nick at his own wedding with Audrey, which is super interesting. But I guess like my only, criticism of that is this is the last we see of Audrey in the entire treatment.
Well, it is. We hear her voice as he tries to talk sense into it. I would like say, "Why explain?" And she's yelling at him and hangs up on him. Yes, it is.
Right.
It is the last.
Yeah, we all kind of agreed on this when we did our Godzilla 98 review. Audrey, we felt like didn't add a whole lot to the first movie, but it would have been interesting to see her. Yeah, it kind of would have been interesting to see her character redeemed, though. I mean, we're fucking criticizing your script from 25 years ago, like we're gonna, but you know what I mean. Like, I thought it was an interesting decision to just completely remove her, but
I love how Philip just like rolls in there. It's like, oh, you call this a movie opening? And just like, it's the wedding.
Yeah, and like, oh my god, like he pulls up in a limo. Nick gets in, the door's shut, and he's the fucking driver. It's like, this is like this pure 90s, like.
Well, it's also the type of thing that Dean and Roland would have loved.
Yeah.
Oh, no, for sure. That kind of humor, that kind of stuff. So.
No, this is.
So, yeah, no, I had to get rid of her right away. You wanted to show that Nick.
Incriminating.
Kind of Nick had settled for something and he had moved on from his adventure with Godzilla. This was him kind of like, well, I would, like going with the, sort of like what's expected of him. And then there was, what's his name, to remind him, no, go, let's go.
All right.
Off on another adventure.
I'll put in quotations, I needed to get rid of her as the thumbnail next to your face. And I'll put police called in the title. So yeah, I mean, after that, well, I'm very much paraphrasing the entire. It's a long treatment.
It is a long.
So
yeah.
Obviously, Godzilla grows up to be an adult. It's found out that he's alive. Felipe finds out that Godzilla's alive and he needs Nick's help. Of course, it ends up being it's not Godzilla, it's the queen bitch. After going to Australia,
I like there was also within the human, characters, there was a double cross. There was a felt of a feeling of betrayal and all this kind of stuff,
right,
building that as well. So, if I just didn't want it to, you try to do something in a movie like this, even though everybody comes in with an expectation. We're going to see giant monsters kicking each other's ass. That is awesome. So where can you, where can you have, something that's, that's conflict, that's, where's the human drama, what happens, et cetera, because they're staples, which is Godzilla's going to fight this thing and then, he's going to win. I mean, that's the staple. So, with the, you just try to play around with expectations in other areas of a movie like that, so that you keep your audience interested, but they're going to get what they came for. but you still want them to be invested in characters. You still want them to be along for a ride that includes more than just monsters fighting, right? So that's
Right. And I will say, besides the whole kidnapping by Felipe, sorry, this whole segment of the script is like almost word for word what happens in the series. So Godzilla escapes, obviously, leads in the water. Godzilla escapes, and then all of a sudden there's like I forgot exactly what happens. I'm sure Nick remembers. I think there's either like villagers that go missing, or there's like
Yes.
there's all sorts of people that go missing. And I was using the you know how the Bermuda Triangle thing,
right.
ships floating. Where are the people? Ship. That was the whole. You know, for me, I wanted to set up this mystery about where are the people, what's happening.
So
So the blame of Godzilla, but still. So I had a lot of fun with that. The idea of, like everybody tried to guess where the people were, and then it's all revealed on Monster Island.
Right. So that happens in the cartoon as well, or basically more or less. And it gets and then Hicks finds out Godzilla's alive. Felipe finds out Godzilla's alive. Felipe goes to Nick to contact him, and Hicks is ordered to like go kill Godzilla. But then it's found out that Godzilla isn't responsible for all that. It's actually his name's like Gustavo, right, Nick? The big slug monster.
Yes.
So it seems like they lifted that whole portion up from your script, and even like later in the script, Hicks is ordered to kill all the babies, and then I think later in the script he has the opportunity to kill Godzilla as well in the run, and I think he gets convinced to spare them since Godzilla ends up being their helper. That also happens in the series. Hicks spares Godzilla.
Is there any universe where I actually stole my treatment from the series? No, it can't. Unless, okay, well, thank you for letting me know that I was ripped off royally.
And another thing too is they repeated the plot with the Queen twice. They did that with the Queen They did it with the Queen Wasp. They did it with the Queen Termite, which also had a colony making people disappear, like the Wasps. And these were episodes like in the same season. And then they did Skeetera, which was kind of like a little bit of a mix of that with some powers of Megaguirus. A little bit.
And I guess we'll go on another tangent, because why not? Because we're about to get into the winged creature that I mentioned. So Queen Bitch, was that like her official name? Because I kind of can't imagine Queen Bitch being on the toys at Walmart. But that's to me.
Yeah. Or seeing the Toho trademark on that Queen Bitch. Toho trademark all limited.
No, that was my little flourish. And I just, for lack of a better character name, I wanted to make it clear that she was the villain of this movie. So that's kind of why I used it. Obviously, it never would have. I don't think she would have been referred to as Queen Bitch in the movie if it had gotten made. But for the purposes of the treatment, just to let everybody know that she was a badass, and so.
Yeah. If you could give her like a full name, what would you give her? Like aside from the Queen Bitch name.
I don't know. I'd probably go look into the biology of bees and wasps and find some description that I would feel like, ooh, that's gross. Okay, let's call it that.
Yeah.
Yeah. When in doubt, just use like the regular Toho naming conventions. Name it like Skeetera or some shit. Like,
Yeah.
Well, I'd probably call her Stinger. I'd probably call her
maybe
Stinger.
that actually kind of sounds badass. Stinger.
Yeah.
All right, that's the canon name. That's it. That's the
Stinger.
name. That's the official name.
That's the official name.
That Tabo said. So obviously later down the road, Godzilla's birthplace or Godzilla's new birthplace is dubbed Monster Island, which, obviously clear Toho reference.
Sure.
We eventually see Godzilla fight the queen bitch, who is a winged insect creature. The military later kills most of Godzilla's babies with a single runt surviving at the end of the film. And by the end of the movie, Godzilla defeats the queen and manages to leave the island in peace with his runt son. So basically, just judging by this treatment, it definitely looks like you're trying to kind of fix Godzilla 98 and bring it back to form a little bit. Like Godzilla has his own like Minya equivalent now. Godzilla actually fights a monster. There's a Monster Island, which it's a bunch of possibilities with new monsters that could come in for a possible another sequel, which is something I did want to talk about. So
No, that was all intentional. That was me, kind of steering it kind of in a minimalist way back into sort of like familiar territory, Toho territory. I mean, Ian Roland made a terrific, like they had their vision of what a Godzilla movie should be, and that's great, or they did it. And, for better, for worse, you could argue about many divided opinions about that movie. But I really wanted to steer it back into more sort of Toho territory with familiar tropes and this and that. And and they knew that. They were, they didn't go through my treatment and say, why do we have to call it Monster Island? So they were well aware of my intention of heading in that direction. They were very supportive of it.
Yeah, and Godzilla the series kind of had, I don't know if you call it an issue or whatever, but Godzilla the series, it kind of reminds me of what J.J. Abrams tried to do with Star Wars Episode 9. And Godzilla the series and both this treatment seem like kind of concerned with trying to like kind of half fix, half like what's the word, like
make amends with
the what came before it.
Exactly.
It's like,
Yes.
oh man. And I think even Godzilla King of the Monsters does the same thing. Godzilla 2014 was like this interesting, it felt like kind of its own thing, and then 2019 Godzilla tried to turn it back into like regular Toho. So
Right.
We do only have 9 minutes left with you, so I do have a few more questions for you, and I did want to get you out on time so you could do whatever, go back to your normal life, go get drunk. All right. So
I appreciate that. And we did, in all fairness to you guys, we did talk about many other things than Godzilla 98. So I appreciate
Right.
you doing that.
Dude, there's only so much Godzilla 98 I can talk about. We had to talk about Atlantis.
I do have a non-Godzilla question, but we can save that for the last thing if you prefer.
Sure thing.
I do too.
All right, cool. So I'll save some time. I'll finish up my 2 questions, and then
Okay.
I'll leave the rest of the show to David and Nick. So I wanted to ask you, because this was obviously a planned trilogy, did you leave room for a third movie? And 2, did you have anything in mind for how the third movie would play out?
Well, anytime you have a Godzilla movie and Godzilla lives at the end, that's your opening to the third or fourth. And I don't recall being aware that they were that there was a planned trilogy so much. I just was really focused on creating, a sequel to their movie that would, sort of like up the stakes, up the game of the, and open it up and bring in other monsters and do a lot of stuff that I loved as a kid in my Godzilla movies. So, obviously with Godzilla living at the end, there's always room for a sequel. If they had done a trilogy, then, and if they'd have asked me to do the trilogy, to write a treatment for this third sequel, I wouldn't have been beholden at all whatsoever to Godzilla 98 by that point, right? So I would have created something completely different and new. So, other than, Matthew Broderick's character and probably, what's his name? The French guy.
Philippe.
Those guys were kind of, those guys, so those guys probably would have come back for some other adventure,
Right.
But I, that's where the similarities probably would have ended between Godzilla 98 and the sequel. And that this movie would stand alone on its own and be, an adventure movie, and so the slate would have been wide open to bring whatever you wanted to get into that scenario.
Okay, so my last question, I'll try to finish this quick. If in the current year, production companies have kind of banked on nostalgia and revivals of old IP, if the very, very, very unlikely situation where Toho was like, all right, guys, let's make like a Netflix Godzilla sequel to 98 or something, would either be on board to work on it or would like to see them use your old script, even if it was like a comic adaptation or something, just to tie up loose ends of the first movie?
I would. Listen, I wrote that treatment, and I really enjoyed writing it, and I thought it was a good sequel to what Roland and Dean had done, and I think they thought it was a good sequel. So yeah, I mean, if Netflix said, "Hey, we're going to make a sequel to Godzilla '98," now write the script 20 years later, I would, of course I'd do it. I mean, of course I'd do it. It's like, when I got to write Batman Year One. Some iconic characters you just can't say no to.
Exactly.
Cool.
So I would do it. I mean, obviously you don't want to be shit, but I would do it. In a way that I would honor the legacy. I mean, that's what you try to do with these movies, really.
All right, David, Nick, you got 5 minutes.
All right. Well, so usually at the end of the show, we kind of like say what we've got going on, but Tab, as I understand, for the past couple of years, you've been trying to do a remake of The Changeling. How's progress going on that, out of curiosity? If you can say anything, I don't know what you can or can't say.
I mean, we've been out to actors, and like that whole thing was just undone somewhat by the pandemic. We had a head of steam, we had a director, we were out to actors, and everybody was very excited, and then there was just this brick wall of pandemic that we hit, and everything slowed down, and so business even today is just finally getting back to some sense of normalcy. So that is ongoing. So I hope that it gets made this year. I always I hope that there's the director we had has come and gone, and a new director is attached, and so that always you kind of have to start over with submissions to actors with a new director. So it's in process, is what I would say to that.
Fingers crossed, because The Changeling is one of my all-time favorites from the 80s.
Oh, great. Yeah, no, I mean, listen, when the producer, ironically, the producer of Stargate, the producer of my movie, Last of the Dogmen, also produced The Changeling.
There you go.
So there you go. It's all a very sort of incestuous relationship in this town. But no, when I wrote a script, I felt like, I wanted, very much like I would do with Godzilla, I wanted to honor The Changeling, the original. But I think the audience that saw that movie in 1980 is very different than the audience, that goes to those kinds of movies today. So I think there was, we had to up the game a little bit in terms of just story, and we also had to up the game in terms of scares. That movie kind of got under your skin and was creepy, but it, like audiences these days go just, like they want their scares in their face, this, that, and the other, and it's really difficult to pull off.
Yeah, for sure.
Like the tone or the style of what The Changeling was in 1980 to pull that off now and have an audience accept it. They might go into it and go, it's fucking boring, man. There's nothing happening, And what's with that wooden wheelchair? Why am I supposed to be scared here? I don't get it.
Why is this bouncing ball supposed to be scary? What the hell?
Yeah,
Why's the
exactly.
ball
The
bouncing?
red ball. What the fuck?
What's the ball
I
bouncing?
paid for blood. So, so it was a challenge, but I think we pulled it off. I'm very proud of that script. So we'll see what happens.
So I know we just did a whole podcast interviewing you. So my friend and I, we have a podcast where we interview writers, and we would love to have you on about Tarzan and Atlantis. Would you be down for that in a few weeks?
Nick, you're networking on my show.
I know. But this is all
I was gonna
Godzilla
say,
themed, so
A podcast featuring writers. Oh my God, you have like 2 or 3 listeners. I don't, like writers aren't necessarily what people gravitate.
We have like 10 on this show, so and you just wasted 2 hours with us.
No, I would be happy to talk about writing. I talk about writing a lot. I teach screenwriting occasionally in forums like this online with people, and I love talking about the process, because I've been doing it for 40 years, and over the course of 40 years, you've learned a thing or two, and have a little bit of wisdom to share. So yeah, no, of course I'd be happy to. Nick.
awesome.
You have my instant message. You just reach out to me and we'll figure something out.
Awesome. So
We're not fucking talking about Godzilla.
and with that, we have a whole. Oh, it hit 9 o'clock. Oh no, Tab's gonna spontaneously combust right now.
You're gonna turn into Pumpkinhead.
Turn a pumpkin head.
After midnight, he turns into like a creature.
We interviewed him after midnight.
Never. Rule number 3 of Tab is you don't podcast after midnight.
There you go.
So
No, I've had a blast, guys. Really, seriously, I had a good time. It was fun to revisit some of those things and think about them now with a little perspective after all those years.
oh shit,
Appreciate the opportunity.
forgot to hit record. No, I'm kidding. That's David's job.
Act it out tomorrow.
Yeah, there we go. We'll fix it in post.
Well, yeah. We'll ask an AI to,
We'll get chat AI to generate it.
we actually have enough voice data to make Tab's voice an AI.
But it was an absolute pleasure having you on, Tab, for sure.
Yeah, no, I had a good time. You guys are great, and good luck. Godzilla '98. Who knew?
Of course. Oh yeah, the greatest movie ever.
Roland, it is the greatest movie ever. If you happen to watch this,
If it's the only movie you've ever seen, it's definitely the best movie you've ever watched.
Exactly, yeah.
It's the greatest movie ever for that one line. That's a lot of fish.
that is a long fish.
Good night. So, it's been No Croissants, and thank you so much for coming on our show, Tab.
No problem.
Your story on this episode tonight will be exposed to dozens of people.
I'm so excited. You can solicit questions from those dozen people.
Awesome. All right, cool.
Thank you, guys.
We'll sign up now. Thank you so much.
No problem. Take care.
You too.